Hello, I'm Matthew Jarron, Museum Curator at the University of Dundee and Coordinator of the Public Art Dundee project, and welcome to one of my virtual public art walks where we'll be wandering around parts of Dundee looking at pieces of public art from the comfort of your own armchair. And today we're going to be looking at the Blackness area, and this of course is particularly important because it was home to the hugely significant Blackness Public Art Programme. So Blackness was the area that had the highest concentration of jute mills, all feeding off the scouring burn, and one by one they were all closing down, and many of the other businesses in the area were also closing. The people who lived there were leaving in droves, a lot of buildings were empty and derelict, and the place really had become a kind of urban wilderness. And then in 1981 the government agreed to name Blackness as Scotland's first industrial improvement area under a new act, and this basically pumped a whole lot of public funding into the regeneration of the area. It was a kind of multi-sector approach but coordinated by the newly established Scottish Development Agency, what's now Scottish Enterprise. And they did a huge amount over the next few years to revitalise the area. So they demolished a lot of the derelict buildings, they refurbished others, they built new industrial units, they built car parks, they widened roads, they did a lot of environmental improvements, various things to try and make the whole area more attractive for businesses. And the reason that art became part of that was thanks to a lady called Liz Kemp, who is Assistant Curator of Art at the Main City Museum in Dundee, what's now the McManus. And she was really keen in getting art out of the museum and into the community. She'd worked in various community art projects before in other places, and Liz managed to get agreement from the Scottish Development Agency and the Scottish Arts Council and the Dundee District Council to work together on a 3-year project called the Blackness Public Art Programme. And this is really significant because, first of all, it was really instituted a new form of public art. So this was art as a tool for economic regeneration of part of a city. And of course it directly led to the citywide Dundee Public Art Programme in 1985, Scotland's first citywide public art initiative. And what was really interesting was that this wasn't just some artists being commissioned to create art in isolation, that the artists were very much working in collaboration with the local planners, with the council, with architects, with engineers, with environmental designers, with the businesses who were wanting to move into the area, with local residents. So it was kind of very much a holistic approach, that the art was kind of part of the whole fabric of the area, and that it was intended to give it a unique visual identity that would really help sort of unify Blackness and make it a very attractive place for businesses. Now, in order to achieve this, Liz had commissioned a feasibility study which was sent to the Scottish Arts Council, and that was largely written by an artists group based in Edinburgh called the Artist Collective, which comprised Tim Chalk, Paul Grime and David Wilkinson. And partly as a kind of thank you for doing that, they then got a separate commission from the Scottish Development Agency to create this amazing mural here on the side of this big gable end in Whitehall Lane. And as you can see, it sort of not only has images of different parts of the area, it features sort of images from the history of Dundee, the Tay Whale there for example, shipbuilding, the Jute Works, there's journalism, printing, Blackness Primary School there. Unfortunately it got graffitied relatively recently, but we are hoping to get that fixed fairly soon. There's the jute bales coming in and so on. So all sorts of different themes there. So it's a really spectacular piece. Right, so we're now going to start heading off into Hawkhill, and let's just see if we can head up this way. Unfortunately, oh look, the barrier's just opened for us. Isn't that convenient? And oh no, it's closed again. Okay, well, I think we probably can't go that way, but let me cut. Right, so here we are. We're back on Hawkhill now, and let's head along to the school here. Very splendid building, originally Hawkhill School, now Blackness Primary School. And the various things to note here, first of all, this nice decorative pattern on the brickwork here, and I'll come back to say a bit more about that in a moment. But the key thing, first of all, to show you is this nice bronze sculpture on the side of the building here, and we'll cut to a better shot of that here. This is by Alistair Ross, one of the tutors at the Art College, and it's called The Flax Weaver. Created in 1985, and it was originally intended to go actually on a building opposite the old Baltic Flax and Jute Works. But unfortunately the building actually ended up getting demolished at just the time they were planning to put it up there. So in the end they decided to move it opposite and put it on the school. It wasn't actually eventually sited until 1989, so it was in fact the last piece from the original Blackness project to be sited. Now, if we come back and look at the rest of the building, you'll see these nice gates here, and they were created at the same time as the nice decorative brickwork by a group called the Blackness Environmental Art Team. Again, we'll cut into some better pictures of them here. Now, this was another of the initiatives of Liz Kemp, and basically it was a group funded by something called the Manpower Services Commission, which was a government funding scheme to help address the mass unemployment problem that existed from the late 70s into the 80s. And they basically, it was a job creation scheme to help tradesmen. And a lot of the work is in brick, for example, like the wall here, because they were trying to train bricklayers to sort of learn new skills and so on. But anyway, this team was funded with Manpower Services funding and also funding from Dundee District Council, and the idea was that they worked on a number of kind of environmental art initiatives around the periphery of the Blackness area. So this project was one of the ones that they dealt with. The team was led by John Gray, who is now of course the city's public art officer, and this particular project at the school was done by one of the team members called Paul Fleming. Right, okay, so now we're going to head further along. And I should say you'll see more of the brickwork further along here, so down the wall there. And there is actually more in the car park. I'm not sure if we'll actually be able to see it. Yeah, you can't really see it from here, but there's more of that decorative brick pattern on the walls in the car park there. Okay, right, now let's head up Tits Lane. What we have here is all that's left of a much larger scheme. In fact, there's actually more left in these images than there is today, actually, because these three sculptures that you'll see on the poles here, sadly only two of these actually now survive, but all three are still intact when this was taken 2015. So this is how it originally looked. You can see it was a hugely complex play park initiative featuring all sorts of different schemes, so all sorts of complicated brick arrangements. Again, this is to do with the Manpower Services funding to train bricklayers, and so there's different patterns in the brickwork there, as you can see. This was all again created by the Blackness Environmental Arts Team, and some of the patterns were based on designs created by school children at the Blackness Primary School, which have been incorporated in these little mosaics into the design. And there's these wonderful kind of concrete sculptures there next to the chute. They were designed by an artist called Steve Bell. And so these are the kind of main surviving parts are two of these three metal sculptures here. These are by Paul Fleming, and you can't really see them very clearly from that angle, so let's have a look and see if we can get a better angle if we move a bit further round. So let's try zooming in here. Yeah, so you can see that, so they're actually based on birds, and you can see that a bit more clearly here. And as I say, sadly, one of the three just mysteriously disappeared a couple of years ago. The other one remaining feature, which you can just see a little bit of, is there's a very small amount left of a mural that was on the back wall here. Unfortunately, partly covered by graffiti, but again, I'll cut in to show you some of the details. So it's got this lovely flying fish here. And then there's also a bit of kind of stylized wave pattern there. And this is part of a much larger mural that was created by Andrew Stewart as part of the project. So you can see more of it in the background of this photo here. And here's a photo of the Beat team. There's John Gray sitting bottom left there, and you can see a bit more of the mural there. So it's a shame that so little of this is left. It was a hugely significant scheme and actually won a national award for Playground of the Year at the time. But as you can see, almost all of it has now gone. Oh, you can still see a little bit of the brickwork there as well, just to note. Okay, so we're going to head up Tits Lane, and we'll just sort of speed things up a bit here. And then along Corso Street. And just cross over Peddy Street, and we'll head into the industrial units at Anfield here. And if we just turn around here on Aitken's Wines, there's a couple of new murals. So these are much more modern. They're not part of the original Blackness scheme. They were just done a couple of years ago. And so the one on the left, and I'll cut to photos of these so you can see them better. There's the left-hand one there, and the right-hand one there. But yeah, let me cut to better photos. So here's the one on the left by Jennifer Clark of Spilth Design, and the one on the right is by Alex Todorova. So they just went up in the last year or two. Okay, right, let's move on. And we'll just head down. Actually, on the way down here, just to point out the nice railings, so that design there. This is part of the wider environmental improvements that were done in Blackness, and that was actually also designed by John Gray. So a really nice little design there. Okay, so we're getting back onto Hawk Hill now. Oh, across the road there, didn't mean to do that. Okay, so again, this was obviously taken a wee while ago because the new flats are still in the process of erection here. There is actually apparently going to be some public art on those new flats at some point, so keep an eye out for those. But what I want to do is first of all show you the Whitehall Theater, and you can just get a little sense of some of the mosaic design that's just on the inside of the entrance here. This is just part of what was a much bigger design. I'm cutting some photos to show you more of how it looks now, but there was actually much more of it originally, as you can see from these old photos, and there were other panels to either side of the entrance as well. And these again were done by the Artist Collective group. So as you can see, much more of it originally, and sadly a lot of that's now been lost. Okay, so let's carry on, and the next building we're going to stop at is this garage here, which was at the time in the early 80s home to Tay Valley Coaches. And Kenny Monroe, a Duncan Johnson graduate, created a series of works, and you can see all four of them in this photo. Unfortunately, there's only one surviving today, so we'll show you images of the ones that no longer survive. They're all silkscreen printing on ceramic tiles, and they show some of the old vehicles that the Tay Valley Coaches used. But unfortunately, when a new garage moved in, of course they wanted to open up windows, and unfortunately they had to get rid of 3 of the panels. They did try very hard to save them, but unfortunately it just wasn't possible. And one of the things that's worth saying actually is that in working on this project, Kenny actually worked with school children in St Joseph's Primary School opposite, which of course has just been demolished to make way for these new flats. So that's very much part of the community involvement that the Blackness programme was really keen on. So that was one of the first pieces to be completed in 1983. Oh, and actually as part of doing it, Kenny also created this little sign for the Tay Valley Coachworks as well. It's just on the building there, and so that's also still there. Now, something very different now, a much more modern piece. If we zoom in here, you'll see this mural. Again, I'll cut to a better photo of that. So this was just done in 2018, and it's a mural showing Juggernaut, the X-Men villain, by a graffiti artist based in Glasgow called Rogue One. Robert McNamara is his real name. And this is kind of, I guess, more typical of a lot of more modern public art, in that whereas the Blackness scheme of the early 80s, everything was about being site-specific. It was about creating things that were relevant to the area, to the history of Dundee, to the history of Blackness, and to the businesses whose buildings they were using. But of course, a lot of modern public art doesn't do that. It just creates images from popular culture. So, I mean, you know, an X-Men villain doesn't really have anything whatsoever to do with Dundee, but it does look quite cool. Okay, now just next to this we have something altogether different, and this building here, which is now 71 Brewing but was at the time in the early 80s part of Alexander Removals. We have this piece here by Keith Donnelly, and I think this is one of the absolute masterpieces of public art in Dundee. I'll just move over so you can see if we can get a better view of it from this end. So this is a series of 5 ceramic relief panels, and again I'll cut to some photos so you can see better views of it. So Keith, again, a recent Duncan Johnson graduate. He was still doing his postgraduate year at the time that this was done. And so he was really interested in the idea that Alexander Removals were basically using this building for storage. So a lot of people's belongings were packed up, ready to go to wherever they were moving to. And he never actually got to see inside the building, and so in a sense that kind of helped, because he kind of imagined all of these amazingly precious belongings kind of boxed up, and he liked the idea that the windows themselves, the window frames, were kind of a way of containing things. And so in each of the window frames he creates this little scenario where you have 2 figures in the act of passing on belongings or sharing stories or memories to each other, but in a kind of deliberately ambiguous way. And they're really beautifully stylized. I think he kind of was interested in looking at sort of ancient forms of sculpture. The name Alexander, of course, had connotations of Alexander the Great, and so he was sort of thinking back to sort of ancient forms of ceramic and so on, and that helped to determine some of the artistic styles as well. But they're incredibly well made, and they look exactly the same now as they did when they were first created. They've just lasted so well. Keith actually did also create pieces on a building that was just on the other side of the road here, now sadly gone, the Watson and Phillip building. Now, down the end of this building here, if we just turn round, we have another piece. This is by Mike DeHaan, another Duncan Johnson graduate, and he created another ceramic work, this time painted ceramic panels. And so there are 4 main panels. The first one features faces of local residents, and so he took lots and lots of photos of local people and then used that as the basis of them. And then the others have various kind of intriguing images relating to the 4 elements. And also there's this little emblem of the flower, which comes from fruit machines. Okay, so let's now move on. We'll head down Blackness Road. We should just point out in passing this very gorgeous school building here. That was the original St Joseph's Primary School, now the Al Maktoum Centre, one of the many fantastic Art Nouveau schools designed by W.G. Lamond in Dundee. So we're now going to head down Urquhart Street, just speed up here. And then just when we get to the bottom here at Beiderbecke's, it's worth just pointing out this rather splendid kind of jazz mural here on the side of the building. That was done by an artist called Liam Palermo. Again, more recent piece that, just I don't exactly know the date, sometime in the last 10 years. And then we'll just head along Brook Street here, and unfortunately that van's just in the way. Let's see if we can see this here. It's kind of difficult to get a good view of this, but just in this little garden area you'll see this little standing stone here, and I'll just cut to another image of that. This is by Liz Ann Wood, another Duncan Johnson graduate. Later became Liz Ann Kempsell when she married the head of sculpture at the Art College, Jake Kempsell. This was created because the building opposite, as it still is, was a vet's, and so she was thinking about animals, and so it's various scenes, I think derived from Aesop's Fables, but with various sort of quite surreal images. So, for example, we've got this rabbit riding on the back of a unicorn. Right, so now we're going to carry on our way up Brook Street, past the Coffin Mill. And we're just heading up Pole Park Road, and then these flats that are just here at the bottom of Pole Park Road, each one of these has this wonderful mosaic entrance. And this was another of the Blackness Environmental Art Team projects. The team actually had its office in one of these flats, and so this was something that they worked on, and they got a lot of the residents of the flats to get involved in it as well. And so each one has a different wonderfully colourful mosaic mural design on it. And this was a project led by Maggie Milne. We'll just take a look at the Third one here. Bins in the way. Again, just cut to a photo there. So they're absolutely fantastic, really bright and vibrant. And again, they've survived really well. Okay, so let's head on up Pole Park Road and we come to another little sort of park area. Right, I'm just going to move back in here so we can see this better. There we go, that's better. So we have these wonderful whale's teeth sculptures here in the park. These again were part of the original Blackness Public Art Programme. They were created by Alistair Smart, one of the sculpture tutors in the art school, and as you see, each one of them is covered with lots of decoration, kind of scrimshaw style, showing different aspects of the history and culture of the city. Right, now we'll just come up to the other side of the park, to the entranceway, and you'll see there's this nice kind of archway, metal archway here, and that was created by Peter Flynn, again as part of the Blackness Public Art Programme. So again, cut to a nicer photo of that there. And then if we just head a little bit further down Lochie Road, oops, wrong road, that's better, we'll see some other designs by Peter Flynn on a fence here. And this was actually intended to be a temporary fence, and it's still there after all this time, like what, nearly 40 years later. And so Peter Flynn did this kind of pattern, and there was originally a lot more of it. It went right the way down this huge long strip. And so again, shot some photos. It's obviously faded quite a lot now, but there's all sorts of interesting geometric designs and so on there. Okay, so let's head back up Lochie Road, and what we're going to do now is we're actually just going to sort of temporarily just stray slightly out of the Blackness area just to show you another project that's nearby. So if we just carry on up Lochie Road for a wee bit, and oh, wrong side of the road again. Right, okay, and we'll go up Cleghorn Street. And the first thing to point out is this rather nice Gable End mural here. And this is one of a number of Gable End murals that were created, designed by John Gray, who after the Blackness Environmental Arts Team work came to an end in 1985. He was again kept on by Dundee District Council, working for the engineering department on the sort of ongoing environmental improvements that they were doing. And so that Gable End was one of a number that he did around the city, but it's part of this this project to create a local park here. And we'll have to go, we'll just have to go around the corner to see this properly. As I do so, actually, en route, we should point out this rather splendid mural on the side of the Miss Barbarette barber shop. This is by Paco Graf, about 4 or 5 years ago now. So let's go in down Black Street and we'll see the rest of the park, and immediately you'll see, well, what's left now is not very much of what there originally was, a bit like the Tits Lane scheme, but we do have another of these very splendid Gable End murals by John Gray. And the reason that it's got this planet design is that, as you'll see, the original play park was done on this space theme. This was 1988, so of course the space shuttle was all the rage at that time, and they created this whole replica of the space shuttle and all sorts of other details. Again, an amazingly detailed production, and again it won various awards at the time. It was really successful. So this was done by Dundee District Council with involvement of John Gray and also Manpower Services funding as well. And so they were really going out of their way to create something over and above, you know, your kind of basic play park. And again, sadly, almost all of it has now gone. We just have the Gable End murals, and there's a couple of little ceramic pieces as well. Right, so now we're going to head back down into town. So we'll just head down this way. Down Lower Pleasance, whizzing up a bit here, back down past the Coffin Mill, and now we're going to go along Douglas Street. Now, this is obviously quite a rough area. It's somewhat graffiti. There's still one of the sort of derelict parts of Blackness. They obviously didn't touch this on the original Blackness Public Art Programme. But you'll see this this wall on the right here. This is well, what you can see here is just some kind of rough kind of tags and so on. But this has now been turned into an amazing graffiti wall, and you'll see some photos here that show some of the really exciting pieces that have appeared. And so there's always sort of new things appearing here. But most spectacularly is this large-scale piece by a Spanish art duo called Chisme, who are made up of two artists artists called Azir and Moose. And this was commissioned last year by a group called Street Art 360, and it's really quite amazingly spectacular. Another piece to point out while we're here, which you can see on Street View, is this little piece in the blocked up window. This is a Nigerian artist called Okolo, who did a series of ceramic graffiti pieces, including this one. Oh, and the other thing to point out is this nice gate here. So here's a photo of it as it looks closed. This is for the Jiu-Jitsu Center, and it was created by Gav Zone Art. Now, whizzing down to this, and this is another bit where Google Street View is kind of behind the times here, because these doorways here have since been replaced by this very splendid two-part street art piece called the Chardon Rose, the Pink Rose or the Thistle, and this is another Street Art 360 commission. And so the piece on the left is by Paco Graf, aka Ian Tyack, and so he is a French artist based in Dundee, and the piece on the right is by an artist known as Mr. Copy, who's a South African artist based in France. So it's a nice kind of international flavour to it there. Unfortunately, as is perhaps inevitable given the part of Dundee it's in, these almost immediately got scrawled on by other graffitiers, if that's a word. Right, okay, let's carry on, and we'll head up West Henderson's Wynd. Now, so we're just outside Meadow Mill, which of course is now the home of Wasp Studios. Hope you've all had a chance to go in there. Lots of amazingly talented artists in there. And I'm not going to be able to go up here on Google Street View, but just at the end there's a garage. And in there, there's a couple of murals by Paco Graf, including this one of the Incredible Hulk. I have to say, if I was taking my car into a garage, I'm not sure I'd really want the Incredible Hulk to work on it, but I'm not sure what you'd get at the end of it. Anyway, let's now move on. And so we'll just head up. So we're coming up to Verdant Works here ahead of us. And we're just going to turn onto Milne Street. And now we have this rather spectacular piece here. And this is one of a number of pieces that were done along Milne Street and Brown Street by the artist Stan Bonner. And this again was part of the original Blackness Public Art Programme. And Stan was also a Duncan of Johnson graduate and was one of the first artists to be commissioned as part of the programme. And so this building is Dundee Indoor Boldklub, and so Stan spent some time meeting the people there and playing bowls, and he created this wonderful sort of long scale relief frieze featuring, basically inspired by the movement of the bowler and his arms and the movement of the bowls in both directions. So it's this wonderful kind of kinetic piece. And it was originally created as a mosaic, and so if I cut to a shot of a detail of it originally, you'll see some of the mosaic detail. So it was originally a much more subtle design. Unfortunately, of course, as the bits started falling off, they decided that rather than try and sort of constantly spend money to replace it, they would just basically take the mosaic off and just leave the board and paint it. And so it's not as nice as it once was, but at least we still have it in that form. Okay, let's now carry on along Milne Street. And as we get to the end here, we'll just turn around, and just on this gable end we have another of Stan's pieces. This is an old print works. Rather annoyingly, there's this big sign in the way saying Milne Street. So let's just see if we can get a better view further round. The piece is called Shadow of Trees, and again Stan was just sort of thinking of I guess a sort of parallel worlds where now this was this sort of very strongly industrial area, but of course once all of this would have been wooded land, and he was sort of trying to sort of reintroduce nature into this very industrial area. And so the trees are actually kind of sandblasted onto the side of the wall, so they've lasted really well. And he also created this planter in front to have some actual plants as well as the sort of virtual plants. And so if I cut to a photo of how it originally looked, it was originally planted with dog rose, and that sort of nicely links to the building opposite, which is the kennels. And unfortunately, this little bit on the ground here is all that's left of the original piece that Stan created on the original kennels, which have since been demolished, which you can see here. And this is a piece called Ghost Dog. And so while Stan was working on the trees opposite, of course, he was hearing this constant barking of the dogs in the kennels. And every so often, they would suddenly stop and there would be silence. And then gradually they'd all start again. And so he asked somebody, well, what's going on here? And he was told that that's what happens when one of the dogs is put down. There's like this sudden silence because the dogs all know and they all just stop barking. And so he was really kind of moved by this, and he started thinking about, sort of concepts of life and death and so on. And so he created this ghost dog outside the kennels as a sort of tribute to the dogs that very sadly had to be put down. So now, of course, that no longer exists. So the ghost dog has itself become a ghost, which I guess is quite nice. Now, there's one other piece here that almost nobody actually knows is there, and it was also created by Stan at the same time. And you can't really make it out here, but again, I'll cut to a photo of it as it once was. So, as part of the industrial development, this wall had been built, cutting off this really nice facade of this older building here. And so Stan created another form of ghost. This is a ghost wall to try and sort of recreate some of the forms that had been cut off. So you can just see the way that the door comes down and the windows come down in brick there, just to kind of recreate that. The snag is that you have to be looking at it from exactly the right sort of viewpoint and angle and distance, and I've never quite been able to work out exactly how to photograph it in that way. And I'm certainly not going to be able to do it on Google Streetview. So anyway, there you go. It's very subtle. Right, okay, let's head back up here. And back up Brown Street towards the centre of town. And just at the top here at the Westport, we come to the final piece by Stan Bonner to show you, which is the Pyramid and Canopies here. And of course, it's now entirely baffling as to what on earth these are doing here, because there's no trace of why they're there. But these were originally created as part of the restoration of an underground toilet. So there was an old Victorian gents toilet underground here, and it had been dilapidated for ages, and so as part of the whole Blackness development, they were doing up the toilet, and they also added women's toilets in for the first time. And so Stan was asked to create something to basically make this more attractive. And so he created the pyramid to cover the old skylight on the toilet. And for the entrances, he created these nice canopies that are supposed to be a bit like trees. And so when the sun shines, they sort of cast shadows onto the pyramid. So again, we'll show you a photo of how it originally looked. And so unfortunately, when they eventually then closed the toilets, they then removed these nice stone parts here and put this horrible metal bit in front of the pyramid to try and stop skateboarders. So it's kind of looking in a rather sorry state, unfortunately. So we'll now zip round to the other side, and then we will just head on up Old Hawk Hill. Okay, now we're not getting very far because almost immediately we come to another piece here, just tucked away here in Johnson's Lane. We have this mural. Again, I'll cut to a better photo of it, although it's actually been repainted since this photo was taken. So the Specs Pistols shot has this wonderful mural by Gav's Own Art again. This is actually the second one he did. He created an earlier one in 2012 and now this new one in 2018. Okay, carry on up here, and now we have another mural, this time on the side of what was the Darcy Thompson restaurant, and we have this nice parrot mural here. This is by Paco Graf, and so Darcy Thompson was Professor of Biology at what was University College Dundee, now the university, and founder of our Zoology Museum, of course, and was very famous for wandering around with a parrot on his shoulder, and so Paco created this wonderful parrot mural here. And even though the restaurant has still closed, thankfully the new owners have kept the parrot, so hopefully they'll continue to do that. And of course it's just a stone's throw away from the Zoology Museum. Right, okay, we'll now carry on further up. We're now entering into the university campus. And the Heisey Building here on the right, I'm not going to obviously be able to go inside here, but if I cut into a photo, you'll see these very splendid wooden sculptures. These are by Doug Cocker, a very notable Duncan of Johnson graduate and former member of staff. They're called Horizons, and they're all inspired by the sort of horizons that he could see from around his studio, which is in Lundy, just outside Dundee. So they were originally created in 2000, and then we sited them there in 2014. Right, we'll whiz on up to the end of Old Hawk Hill. And on the Life Sciences building here, the new extension, the Discovery Centre, we have this very splendid piece created by Elaine Schemmelt, Professor of Fine Art Printmaking at the Art College. And so this is punched aluminium, and it's called Scales of Life, and it shows the sort of different molecular and organella and various other scales of different organisms and so on. And that was made in conjunction with the researchers in the School of Life Sciences. Now, we're going to walk up this little lane here. I'm not going to be able to do that on Streetview, so I'll now cut to Hawk Hill. And here we are back on Hawk Hill. And we'll now start heading up here. And again, we're just going to sort of quickly deviate down mid-wind here. And this is where Generator Projects have their headquarters, really interesting artist-run space. And on the outside of it, you'll see this rather splendid, very bold sort of mural design. And this was created in 2017 by an artist called Timo Aho. And now we'll head back up onto Hawk Hill. And getting near to our starting point, just one more thing to show you, which is on the side of this industrial building here, and you can't see it on Street View, but again I'll cut to a photo. There's this nice mural advertising Strachan's Tyres by Paco Graf. That was just created last year. Right, so we'll now head back along to the point at the top of Rye Hill Lane where we started, and that is us. So thank you very much indeed. Hope you found that interesting. A bit of a whiz round. I think we've done that much faster than we would do if we were actually walking, but hope you found that of interest. And next time you get the chance, do go out and visit all these places for real. Okay, keep an eye out. There'll be more of these virtual walks coming soon, but that's it from me. Bye for now.